is much better. Okay, well, I think people will trickle in. Some people will come in person. Some people will join in on Zoom. Let me send out that link again. Richard, I put together a little worksheet, a little tech sheet.
Good.
So we're all on the same page. So I just sent it into the chat. And that's what we'll be working. So welcome everyone to our Passover workshop for 2022 or 5,782. And really this workshop, I have a certain idea of what I want to do, but it's also, I'm here to answer your questions. And maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm not a full expert on a Passover Seder. I know, Richard, shocking, right? But one of the amazing things about Passover is that there are so many different ways that people observe a Seder, so many different family traditions, cultural traditions, depending on where your family comes from, many different songs, different things like that. So my plan for today is to frame sort of what a Seder is, what its purpose is, and to go through sort of some of the best hits, some of the songs, going through some of the rituals and elements of it, things like the 4 children, the 4 questions, those types of things. And hopefully it'll help you along with whatever Seder either you're attending or might be leading. I know Ira was saying he's leading. Do you want to tell them about the Seder you're leading?
I'm having, it was supposedly 16 people, but 2 canceled. And I've got 14 people coming for dinner. I just moved into a new affordable housing building, and there's a huge community room with a kitchen, and I'm going to use it and cook up a storm. So I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Richard or Pearl, are y'all leading Seders or?
No, I'm a freeloader.
Great. Well, happy to have you. What about you, Pearl? Oh, here comes in Robert. Welcome in. Okay. So we got a couple more folks coming in. Welcome in, Robert. Welcome in, Veronica. We were just getting a sense of what folks here are going to be leading their own Seder this year. Maybe how many people, where it's going to be. That, if you feel comfortable sharing that. We won't be taking down any addresses. Don't worry about that. There's Pearl. Welcome in. Got the green screen behind you and everything. You're ready to go. Okay, well, let's go ahead and dive in. Let me send out this tech sheet one more time. Great. So we have, on the first page, I wanted to give a couple texts to sort of frame what a Seder is. So the first we have from the book of Exodus. You shall observe this as an institution for all time. And here we're in the middle of the Passover story. We're going through the ritual of slaughtering the lambs, putting the blood on the doorposts, all of that good stuff. You shall observe this as an institution for all time, for you and your descendants. And when you enter the land that the Eternal will give you, or Adonai will give you, as promised, you shall observe this rite. And when your children ask you, what do you mean by this rite or this ritual? And that's actually a very, very important part. You shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to Adonai, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when smiting the Egyptians, but saved our houses. Now, of course, the original context of Passover is the sacrifice in the temple. But over the course of time, and once the temple was destroyed, it becomes about those last 2 lines there, those last 2 verses. And when your children ask you, what do you mean by this rite? You shall say, is the Passover sacrifice to Adonai. So the idea being that you want to tell this story. It becomes less about the physical sacrifice, more about telling the story. So if we fast forward, a few hundred years or so, we got Mishnah Pesachim. On the eve of Passover, a person may not eat until dark so that they will be able to eat matzah that night with a hearty appetite. I think they're trying to sort of replicate that feeling of coming out of slavery. Even the poorest of Jews should not eat the meal on the Passover night until they recline, as free and wealthy people recline when they eat. This was a common Greco-Roman practice in the Greek and Roman world. Robert, I see you're joining in with another account. Do you want me to?
Yeah, I'm trying to use, that's just so I can read on this thing
Sure,
with the
sure. No problem. I just want to
link.
make sure.
It's easier, yeah.
And everyone gets 4 cups of wine. That's sort of the gist there. And then later in the Babylonian Talmud, we have this teaching of Rabbi that in order to keep people up, because we read that the original Passover Seders would go late into the night. I know some folks, if you've been in more traditional communities, they can really last until midnight and later. I know that for many of us, that's just not going to work. And we see that Rabbi Akiva would distribute roasted grains and nuts to children on Passover Eve so that they would not sleep, and so they would ask. And the importance of them asking is so you can tell the story. And that's where we get the term Haggadah, the Passover Haggadah, as we usually pronounce it, which means the retelling of this story. And that's the really important part, the idea of asking questions, retelling the story, and over the course of the meal, you have different opportunities to ask questions. And you actually want to encourage people to ask questions, particularly within this context, children. And that actually plays a role in many of the different fun things that you can do during a Seder. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. We got a couple more people joining us. Welcome in. Hello, Veronica. Hello, Elise. I'm going to send the text sheet that we're working on so y'all can follow along with us. We're on page 2. So here we have the order of the Seder HaSeder, because Seder literally means order. And we have the little explanations of what each of them are. And there's actually a melody that many people use to remember it by. So we're gonna learn a little bit of the melody. Those of you who are joining online, I did send a video, so you're welcome to check that out. Ideally not right now, but the melody goes like this. We'll do it piece by piece. Kadesh Orchatz,
Kadesh.
Orchatz. So it goes Kadesh Orchatz.
Got it.
Karpas. Yachatz. Magid. Rochza. Motzi Matzah. Maror. Korech. And those of you online, I hope you're saying it along with us.
Unmute yourself.
Yeah. Shulchan Orech, the meal.
Shulchan Orech.
Safun. Hallel.
Barech.
Oh, Barech, yes, I skipped one. Hallel. Nirtza. Of course, these are all Hebrew terms, but so the tune goes like this. Kadesh Orchatz, Karpas Yachatz. Let's try that together. Kadesh Orchatz, Karpas Yachatz. Great. Let's try it one more time. Kadesh Orchatz, Karpas Yachatz. Great. I can hear you singing out there. Awesome. So then the next part is Magid Rochza. Motzi Matzah. All together. Magid Rochza. Motzi Matzah. One more time. Magid Rochza. Motzi Matzah. Great. So all together up to that point. Kadesh Orchatz, Karpas Yachatz, Magid Rochza, Motzi Matzah. Awesome job. And then we got Maror Korech, Shulchan Orech. One more time so you can hear it. Maror korech shulchan orech. Let's try it together. Maror korech shulchan orech. And then we sort of go back to the original melody. Safun barech halel nirtzah. And then it keeps going. So let's try it all together. I think, so, no, I lied. Apologies. So it's Maror Korech Shulchan Orech. Then that repeats Tzafun Barech Halel Nirtzah. So all together it's Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Rochza Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech Tzafun Barech Halel Nirtzah. Awesome. Now you know the Seder. We're done here. So if you ever get, nowadays, especially with all of our nights, so we have in front of us, this is the newest Haggadah CAR, that's what we have, but I also brought, this is the Haggadah that I grew up with, also known as the Baskin Haggadah. But I know that Haggadahs come in many shapes and sizes, and most of them will include this order. So just to walk through it real quick, so we have Kadesh coming from the same root as Kiddush or Kiddush, where you bless the first cup of wine. You have Orchatz, which is actually the same as Rochza, if you can see its similar sounds. And that's washing your hands. You don't say the blessing when you wash your hands this time, but it's a way of it's really washing your hands before you eat. And then we have Karpas, we have the green vegetable. And I also brought a Seder plate here. It should have a Karpas section. Most often, I think, for many of us, it's parsley. Then we have Yachatz. We have this ritual of breaking the middle matzah. And that middle piece that you break, one part of it you pass around, and one part of it you hide. And that is the afikomen. Exactly. And then we have Magid. We tell the story. Haggadah, same root. And we have Motzi. It's the same as Hamotzi. We have the blessing of the matzah. So Motzi, which is the blessing over the meal, but then you have a specific blessing for the matzah. So let's actually take a look at these blessings. So for Kadesh, you have Berei Pri Hagafen. There is a longer version specifically for a festival. Many Haggadahs will include that. Of course, depending on how comfortable you feel, you can choose to just read the English translation, whatever it may be. And then once we get to Karpas, the blessing we say ends with Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei Peri Ha'adama. Adama meaning earth. So it's not necessarily special to Passover. It's something that you say typically whenever you eat something that comes from the ground. And then we have Motzi lechem min haaretz. I think that one's a little bit more straightforward. And then let me find the page because I want to do the blessing for. That's over the parsley. Correct. Okay. Correct. 130, 132. That's what I'm looking for.
So that's the green vegetable?
Correct.
Is the parsley.
Right. So you have
just ask an obvious question. Why is the green vegetable separated out as far as the blessings go?
Mm-hmm. Why is it separated as opposed to if you just said motzi and that's the case for the whole meal?
Yeah, as opposed to doing it later on where you're blessing the matzah and the bitter herbs and.
Right. I think the idea is that you do it before. So usually, if, for example, for those who aren't familiar, if you have a big meal and there's bread involved, you say hamotzi. If you have, say, like a salad, technically you say a different blessing if there's not bread there. But the bread blessing encompasses everything. So you're actually eating the karpas before you get into the matzah and the meal.
Oh, okay. So it reflects the order of eating it. That's
Right.
That's what.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, okay.
And it's also in terms of karpas, the symbolism, and obviously different Haggadahs will explain it in different ways, but karpas is very much about spring. And Passover being a blend of obviously the holiday commemorating the Exodus, but it's also an agricultural festival. It happens in the spring. It celebrates springtime. So then we have the blessing so we have motzi, and then you have the blessing specifically for the matzah. And just in case folks, I know that the Hebrew or transliteration can be kind of tricky. You say Asher Kidshanu b'mitzvotav. Do you want to turn to? We're getting to matzah here. I flipped ahead.
Okay.
So Asher Kidshanu b'mitzvotav bitzivanu al achilat matzah should be in there. So if folks want, please let me know if this is helpful or if it isn't. If I'm spending too much time on it, I'm here. I am your servant. So just walking through it, and then we can keep moving on. We have telling the story, motzi matzah, and then we have the herbs, the maror, oftentimes is horseradish. And then we have what's called korech, which is often referred to as the Hillel sandwich, where you get your haroset, you get a little bit of sweet and tartness, and then you get your maror, which is the bitterness. Sandwich all that together with the matzah, and you got your what's referred to as the Hillel sandwich.
And where does the bitter herb come in?
Right. That's the maror.
Well,
so technically, when you bless the bitter herbs, you eat just the horseradish.
So it's got two bitter herbs here.
Right. That's the tricky thing. I actually ran into this issue.
So maybe that's
last
why
year.
There are only 5 of these.
Right.
That's why there's only 5 pictures here.
It could be because they is kind of like a bitter vegetable, usually like lettuce of some kind. And then there's also maror. But you don't say a blessing for chazeret. Chazeret is actually, I think karpas and chazeret have been used interchangeably. Chazeret is the one that you dip, typically in salt water. And then karpas is the green parsley. So growing up for me, it was like you dip the parsley in the salt water. And so I was confused why there was lettuce as well as karpas. But that's why it's technically both.
Well, we always made that part of the sandwich.
Oh, I haven't heard that before. You put the parsley in the sandwich?
No, the romaine lettuce and the charoset and the matzah.
So now it's more of like a real sandwich. I love that. I love that.
So there's nothing wrong with that, is there?
No, not at all. So we have the Hillel sandwich, which brings us into the meal. And of course, throughout this, we have different readings and things. And then we have safun, which in Hebrew means to find something. And that's how you find the afikomen. And then we have barech, which is the after meal blessing. Birkat hamazon is the other term for it. And then hallel, which is oftentimes various songs. Specifically, hallel is usually psalms, collections of psalms. You'll see towards the back of your Haggadah. Full disclosure, for me growing up, we never made it to that last 4 part of the Seder. It was like, oh, we got our meal, we found the afikomen, that's fine. And then nirtzah, you have sort of declaring the Seder complete. Anyone have any questions as we turn to page 3 where we have the diagram of our Seder plate?
Well, not really, but it seems like just by implication, this is incomplete because it only talks about 1 cup of wine rather than the other 3. I don't know if that means the order as far as the other 3 cups of wine go is optional, or it
Right.
just doesn't.
I
included
was
in
about
this.
to ask that question as well, because I'm looking in this old Haggadah that I have, and it says the second cup, the third cup, and the fourth cup, but it doesn't list that.
Right. So that's not part of like this song in the major sections. It is filtered in. Generally, I believe I am correct. I'd have to take a look. You bless the first cup of wine, and then you bless the last cup of wine, which comes as part of Birkat Hamazon. I don't believe you recite blessing for the other cups, but I will check that.
We
right
always
now.
needed a second cup after the first piece of matzah, 'cause
Right.
it was to wash it
Right.
down.
Are the four cups maybe an innovation that happened after the song was put together or something, or not really?
I'm not sure. I mean, the list is pretty early on. I mean, we do know that this changed over time, but the four cups. I mean, we already had the four cups were pretty early. It's just a matter of where they stand. But these are like the major sections, and then the four cups are each have their different. They have their. So, for example, I'm looking at the second cup is during Magid. And then the third cup is during, or at least in this, and then the third cup is during Barech, which is what I mentioned earlier. And then the fourth cup is at the very end. So in this Seder, we do have blessings for each cup of wine. But the difference is the Kadesh is the larger blessing, not just for the cup of wine, but also for the major holiday that we're commemorating. You know, it's one of those things where we say Kiddush, and Kiddush is the blessing over the wine. It's really that longer blessing that comes after. That's what brings in the day. So we have this diagram here of what's on your Seder plate. So we just talked about how there's kind of two bitter herbs. There's the chazeret, and then there's also the maror. We have parsley or a boiled potato for dipping in salt water.
Zero.
And I have heard of people using actually like French fries and dipping it in sort of like either ketchup or something similar to that, because you get the dipping, which is really what you're doing, but it's a little bit more appetizing than salt water. Haroset and so a hard-boiled egg, which doesn't necessarily play a role in explicitly in the sense that like we don't say a blessing over it, but it is commemorative of the sacrifice in Jerusalem as well as the shankbo, both of those. And then also I love this diagram because it also talks about new traditions. So we got vegan options or vegetarian options to replace these, but we also have the new traditions of the orange, which represents LGBTQ inclusion. And then these other ones were new to me. I had never heard of these. Again, one of those amazing things about Passover is how expansive and how it continues to grow and to change. But many people will put olives as sort of an olive branch, praying for peace. Folks in interfaith families apparently use an artichoke. I was not familiar with that one. And a tomato in support of farm workers' rights. And then the other thing that's not on this diagram, but is worth talking about, that comes up a little bit later on in the Seder, is you also have an extra cup that you eventually fill with wine, known as Elijah's cup. The idea being that there are three occasions in a Jewish person's life, or three occasions in Jewish life when Elijah is sort of called upon or invoked. Can anyone think? So we have Passover. Can anyone think of the other two? When else is Eliyahu Hanavi or Elijah the prophet called upon, invoked, that name?
On the Sabbath, is that?
Close, at the very end of the Sabbath. During Havdalah, at the very end, during Havdalah, we sing about Eliyahu Hanavi. And at a bris, generally, Elijah is granted a special chair. These being, each of these being sort of calling upon the promise of redemption, the bringing in of the Messianic age, a lot of sort of symbolism behind that. And then a modern tradition that many people have, that we'll have at our Seder, is a cup filled with water, as well as the cup filled with wine, which is an ode to Miriam. Miriam, the prophet, who played such an important role in the Exodus story. And she is always associated with water. She's associated with wells when they're in the desert, and also we hear about her walking down the river following Moses as a baby. So she is always connected with water, and this is a way of recognizing not only her and her importance to our tradition and how we call on her when we're telling the story, but also her representing many people who have been cut out of the story over the course of time, namely women for the most part. So,
if I could ask you a question, is
Sure.
it a biblical, I don't know if commandment is the right word, but is it a biblically prescribed to go through a Seder on Passover? Because I thought that it was an invention of the rabbis after the temple was destroyed, and that the biblical rule was to go to the temple in Jerusalem to pray or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but on the other hand, I have something in my mind about it being somewhat of the mitzvahs in the Bible to recount Passover, recount the story of Passover. So I'm just wondering, do I remember incorrectly, or are they both true? Or
Yeah,
or
you
what's the
are
situation?
absolutely remembering correctly. So doing a Seder, the meal that we have that tells the story, is not part of the Torah. The observance that we read about on the first page is the Passover sacrifice, the presenting of sacrifices in the temple of Jerusalem. After the temple was destroyed, the Seder was developed as a way of commemorating the holiday, but recognizing the fact that the temple did not stand. And so what you're talking about in terms of the mitzvah of retelling the story actually comes from that passage in Exodus on the first page of the packet that I sent you, because it says, "And when your children ask you, you shall say to them." And that is considered a mitzvah, telling that story.
So did they have the whole concept of the 613 Torah-related mitzvahs in the past, or is that like a post-temple thing also to invent that?
You mean the number 613?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
just
that's also a post-temple thing. But I just want to point something out, because I know this is kind of it's like a hot button issue oftentimes, or at least depending on what circles of like social media, the internet you float around in. But there's a big phenomenon these days of Christian communities holding Passover Seders. And I really want to note and lift up that I understand what they're doing and I understand what they're trying to do, but it is anachronistic. From at the time when Jesus lived, Passover Seders were not a practice, because the temple was still standing and they were still offering sacrifices. And so it is oftentimes it is a form of appropriation of Jewish rituals for Christians to be doing that. So I'm not saying go out, and find anyone who even thought about holding a Seder to counter that. And I see Richard was nodding his head, so it seems
So the concept that the Last Supper was really a Passover Seder is just completely off, apparently.
correct.
I remember this from the West Wing: post hoc ergo propter hoc, after, therefore, because of. Jesus had dinner with his, and I don't mean to sound rude, but I am rude, and y'all know that. Yes, it's cultural appropriation. And I kind of find it a little offensive.
Yeah.
But that's just me being rude, and y'all know that.
I don't think you're the only one if my Twitter has anything to say about it. But yeah, I just want to lift that up. So let's keep moving a little bit. I know I'm not going through sort of step by step with the Seder. Thankfully, one of the good things about Haggadahs is they really sort of bring it through. But I wanted to give some highlights, some things that are usually lifted up as being some of the more important parts. So one of the things I definitely wanted to talk about was the 4 questions. We have this description of 4 questions that are asked. And again, it all goes back to that original text, and actually the text from Pesachim that talks about encouraging people to ask questions. You want people to ask questions so you can tell the story and tell the meaning. So I thought it would be nice for us to sing through the 4 questions. Oftentimes, the youngest person present at the Seder is the one who sings the 4 question. Again, going back to the importance of this is a very child and educational focused holiday. It's all about education. All right. So, do I have any brave souls that maybe are familiar with the melody that want to give it a go? But if not, I'm happy to guide us through it. All right. So if you want to join me, feel free. So we have. I don't think I know that melody. Okay, I'm sorry. What was that to the tune to? Okay. So we have. Sorry. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot mikol halelot. Okay, so that's sort of the refrain. That's gonna come up every once in a while. So let's sing that again, and then we'll go into the first question. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot mikol halelot shebechol halelot anu achi chametzu matzah chametzu matzah halayla hazeh halayla hazeh kulo matzah halayla hazeh halayla kulo matzah shebechol halelot anu achli she'ar yirakot she'ar yirakot halayla hazeh halayla hazeh maror. This one's tricky. Shebechol halelot ein anu matbilim afilu pa'am echad afilu halayla hazeh halayla hazeh shetei amim halayla hazeh halayla shetei amim shebechol halelot anu ochli ben yoshvin uvein mesubin ben yoshvin uvein mesubin halayla hazeh halayla mesubin halayla hazeh halayla kulam mesubin. Great job. I could hear you singing along. Y'all were doing great. So again, these questions actually are placed in sort of the voice of a child, and it actually speaks to why we do all these sort of strange things. The idea is you have this meal that is longer, that's more ordered, where you're eating different things, and you're actually physically eating it in a different way. You're reclining so we say either upright or reclining. Why do we all recline in the 4th question? And the idea is like, okay, why are we doing all these special things? And again, prompting a way of answering that. We do all these special things because of what God did for us when we came out of the land of Egypt. That's the idea. And actually, we know that the 4 questions have changed over the course of time, and honestly, based off of people's eating habits. So, for example, eating reclined, if you're living in ancient Greece, was not an abnormal thing to do. That was the thing you normally did. But if you're in ancient Persia, where people weren't doing that quite as often, reclining when you eat is a difference. It's a change. You're doing something different. So I think that's one of the things to think about when you're planning for a Seder is, okay, what's the difference between this Seder and like a regular dinner party, other than the fact that we all have these books in front of us and stuff like that? What are like small things we can do to sort of change it and make it different and unique in its own way? Yeah, Ira, did you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to ask a question because it says, the question is, why do we dip twice? And I'm seeing where we dip the karpos in salt water.
Right. So you
And when do we dip? I don't see, when do we dip the second time?
right. So you dip.
Or is it a
So you dip the karpas.
or is it a stand?
Right. That's a good question. I'm
disco dip.
gonna see if I can find that.
So because
I'm gonna find it. If I can't find it tonight, then I'm sorry, y'all didn't get your
then Seder's canceled.
Seder's canceled, exactly.
We'll eat ham.
I mean, it says, why do we? I mean, I see where we dip once, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I don't see where we dip or what we dip. Or is it our fingers in the wine when we do the plagues?
That could be it. That could be it. I'm not sure.
Maybe
I'm gonna look into
we
that. That's a
dip
really good
11
question.
times.
That is a good question. I'm gonna look into that.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I will find the second dip.
I mean, I'm loving this. I'm gonna throw some artichokes and olives. And it can just be
Great.
world peace. It doesn't have to be just between.
Right.
It could just be for peace.
I love
right?
that. Yeah.
Olives just for peace.
Yeah.
I like
Great.
that.
So another thing I wanted to lift up was the 4 children. Obviously, we have this theme of 4. We have 4 questions. We have 4 glasses of wine or grape juice. And I wanted to address this because it's one of those things where over the course of time, we've reframed this and we think about it a little bit differently. So traditionally, the 4, and of course, traditionally it was 4 sons. The 4 sons of Passover are the wise one who asks, why do we do this? The wicked one who says, why do you do this? The simple one, I didn't have that question off the top of my head.
What is this about?
Right. Who's sort of asking about all of it together, and then the one who does not know how to ask. And of course, it's presented as 4 paradigms for different types of children. One who is sort of bought into the community, one who is sort of seeking to step away from the community, that idea of why do you do this? Not, I'm not a part of it. A simple one, maybe one that's still picking things up, and one who doesn't know how to ask. Of course, nowadays we are much more sensitive to different learning styles, different types. We don't want to demonize children, and also we don't want to say, okay, just because a child might be a little bit rebellious at this stage, that they're wicked, and we push them away from the community, because that's not what we're about. That's not. And it's really pedagogically and educationally not a great strategy, because if you push them away, they'll never have that opportunity to learn. And so I wanted to just lift that up and address that. And I brought this poem that's in this new CCAR Haggadah that we have here, but I thought it was a really powerful poem to share. And it also points out that over the course of your Seder, it doesn't have to just be straight from the Haggadah. If you have a poem or you have a song that you feel like relates to a certain part of the story or a certain character or a certain reading, bring it in. It's not one of these things. Ira commented when we came in about sort of the heftiness of this Haggadah, and a big part of it is because there's a lot of optional readings in here. Pretty much any time on the left side of the page are a lot of optional readings, but they can help sort of breathe new life into your Seder or offer
Stylized and customized.
100%. So I'll go ahead and read the poem. It's called Dayenu, fitting. We'll get to Dayenu here in a second. With Erica Dreyfus. At Passover, we read aloud from Haggadah, and we mention 4 children. When I was growing up, we laughed, as each found its match around the table. The wise child, the rebellious, the simple. But later the laughter stopped when we reached the child who was unable to ask. We looked at him, this little boy whose brain and muscles and vocal cords couldn't always communicate. Back then, we didn't know when he'd be able to ask, when he might utter intelligible words, let alone questions, syntactically. Now he sings Dayenu with all the other children. Elijah smiles, Miriam dances. Applaud. I just thought that was beautiful. And I think also if we think about a child who's unable to ask, if we're thinking about it in terms of children who are nonverbal with various learning differences, things like that, it also shows us that that the ancient rabbis and the folks putting together the Seder also were familiar with different types of people who had different needs, and I think that's where the beauty of the 4 children can come in, where you're recognizing, yes, different people have different needs, different people absorb information and stories in different ways. And one of the beautiful things about Passover and the Seder is that there's a lot of different ways to connect with it. There's the food, the songs, there's the sort of the fun games, there's the actual telling of the story. You have books in front of you, there are pictures, artwork. It's a sort of multi-sensory, multi-experiential experience. That doesn't make multi-experiential experience. You know what I'm saying. Okay.
At some of our Seders, community Seders, in the past, we've used video, music as a way of reaching people who may not, engage the text.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have our, here at Kol Ami at the Community Seder, we'll have our the PowerPoint up with visual tefillah slides. We'll have some videos, and also one of the things that I experienced for the first time when I went to Israel for a year was you don't all have to have the same Haggadah either. Now, if you're reading things in unison in English, obviously it helps, but I've been to Seders where there are all different types of Haggadahs. There's a Harry Potter one. I know there's a Hamilton one now. Any kind of Haggadah you want, it's out there. And also, I included in this packet, I know Ira mentioned you were putting together kind of your own Haggadah, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
which I did.
There's a website called haggadot.com, and they have a really great tool to be able to put together your own Haggadah. If for a lot of people who aren't going to go and buy a bunch of Haggadahs, I'm pretty sure Maxwell House will still sell them, and I know they came out with a special Marvelous Mrs. Maisel one either last year or the year before. But it's a very much another thing I love about Passover is it's a home holiday. It's an at-home holiday. Obviously, we do the community Seder here because we want to be together as one big community commemorating the holiday. And one of the benefits of having 2 nights is you do one Seder more at home with your family, one Seder with your community. But it's very much sort of like a DIY kind of holiday, which is what I love.
And I'm sorry.
No, please.
My aunt was more traditional, a little more observant, but at her Seder, everyone signed the Haggadah. They were in loose leaf binders, and everyone signed it at the back. And, it was beautiful to see, and you signed it every year. So you saw who was there, and then you saw, oh, so-and-so passed away, they're not here. So it was a collective telling of our family story.
Yeah. I love that. I really love that. It reminds me of, I have some old prayer books passed down by my family. And actually, it was in prayer books that people usually wrote birthdays, yard sites, all that kind of thing. Usually it was prayer books, not Bibles, which was the case in a lot of Christian households. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, Richard. And that actually reminds me, when I was at, there was a big CCAR, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, big convention in San Diego last week. And I just heard in passing, and I don't know who it was or who originally had the idea, so I can't credit it to them. But someone was talking about the idea of having an empty chair at your Seder table as a symbol of the people who didn't make it, the people who didn't make it through the journey, the people who didn't make it to redemption and to freedom. Which I thought was really powerful, and it sort of reminded me, or what you were saying, Richard, reminded me of that. But so there's all different types of things you can do. So I wanted to talk about the 10 plagues. This is also a really great opportunity for some creativity. So most traditionally, you have your glass of wine, and then I don't know why. Usually people use their pinky. Or grape juice, and you take out and you put a drop on the plate for each one. For all the different plagues. Interesting thing, I learned once that many people will, I think typically when you put your finger in like a drink or something, your reaction is to to lick it afterwards, but I the harshness of the plagues, which was, and it just goes to show that even like little gestures, little things like that can be meaningful. Also, if you're feeling crafty and festive, it's always fun to have different little toys or masks for the different plagues. Is that what you're doing?
I found some jumping frogs. So little plastic jumping frogs that are going to be the part of everyone has a seat. So everyone's name, I printed out a piece of matzah. So I'm writing everyone's name on the matzah and putting it on the little frog.
I love it.
And I glued Google eyes on the frogs, and you just press the bottom of the frog.
I might crash your Seder.
And it'll jump.
I might crash your Seder.
You can come. You're invited.
Thank you. Okay, so and then finally, I wanted to do some songs. It wouldn't be Passover without some songs. Here are some of the classics. These are primarily in Hebrew, or in the case of the last one we're going to look at, and I definitely want, because I have a fantastic video that I want to show everyone. But these are just some typical songs you're going to hear. So the first couple actually show up during the Seder itself, and then the last two that I included, things like Adir Hu and Chad Gadya. Another one that I didn't include here, couldn't do everything, is Chad Mi Yodeya, who knows one. So the first one is Dayenu. So I think most people are pretty familiar with this, but just for practice, so we're refreshed, I included a few of the verses. It's not all of the verses. And you'll see with a lot of these songs at the end, they go on for ever and ever and ever. So we're just going to do a little taste of it, but Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu Hotzianu Mitzrayim, Hotzianu Mitzrayim, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu Natan lanu et Shabbat, Natan lanu et Shabbat. Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu natan natan lanu et Torah, natan lanu et Torah, Dayenu. Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Great. This one's pretty straightforward.
If you go on YouTube, there's a version of this that they do to I will always love you. It's really fun. So check it out.
So
on
that's a good
YouTube.
one. I also
Okay.
gave a link, the Maccabeats, which is a Jewish a cappella group. They
Yes.
put together one, and
Yeah.
each verse is actually in a different musical style.
That's who did this one.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this must have been from another year. So it's good. You can, and if you want to go around the table, if you're in a group of people that are comfortable with it, each person does a verse. If you want to go through all of them, there's you can do it in different ways. So another one is, we're running low on time, and I really want to do a Dayenu, just because I really love it. But another one is Avadim Hayinu. We were slaves. Ata b'nei chorin. Now we are free. So, Avadim Hayinu, Hayinu. Ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin. Avadim Hayinu. B'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, tata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin. So you can check out a nice little fun version of that on the YouTube. We have Eliyahu HaNavi, which people might be familiar with from Havdalah. Eliyahu HaNavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu. B'mehera b'yamenu yavo Eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David. And then many people include Miriam. They do this on Havdalah as well. Miriam HaNeviah, Oz Zimra beyada, Miriam tirkod itanu, le'adil Zimrat olam, Miriam tirkod itanu, letagen et haolam. B'mehera b'yamenu, hitavienu, El mei Yeshua, El mei Yeshua. So we have Dayenu, another long one, and it's long because it actually goes through the entire Hebrew alphabet. So you have Dayenu. So we have Dayenu Yivne Beito Bakarov. God is mighty. May God rebuild God's temple soon. And then as you keep going, so then you repeat the speedily, speedily in our days. It's praying for the rebuilding of the temple, for the restoration to Jerusalem, all of that, but really broadly praying for the establishment of the Messianic age. So this tune I think is really nice. If you do it slow, it's a very sort of, nice, sort of like a, to me it almost kind of sounds like like an old school hymn or something. But as you move forward, you can pick up the pace and do it faster. So, Dayenu, Yivne Beito Bekarov. Let's try that together. Dayenu, Yivne Beito Bekarov. And then we keep going. B'mehera, b'yameinu bekarov. El b'nei beitcha bekarov. So let's do it one more time. Dayenu, Yivne Beito Bekarov. B'mehera, b'yameinu bekarov. El b'nei beitcha bekarov. So if you're going to pick up the pace, you could do I included just the second verse here. Bachur hu, gadol hu, dagul hu, yivnei beito bekarov, bimhera, bimhera, b'yameinu bekarov, b'nei beitcha bekarov. Now, depending on what Haggadah you have, you might have some English for this. And ours is page 198. If anyone has this, I would be surprised. So there are different English translations for it. So this one, the one we have here is powerful, merciful, God of those before us. In this week, as we speak, freedom's grateful chorus. El B'nai, build us and restore us. So there are English options for it. The sheet music I looked at for this was very antiquated English, I must say. Like very, very antiquated, but you can find them anywhere.
Like where?
I can send out some English translations, or I could scan you a copy of this if you
Oh,
want to do
no,
it.
the sheet music you said.
Oh, the sheet music, I can send you that.
Because I have someone that plays the piano that's coming.
Great,
to
yeah.
the Seder.
I have
So-
sheet music for a lot of this stuff, so
Oh,
I can send you some of that.
all right. Well, let me look through here, and I'll email
Sure.
you the songs I think we're going to sing,
Great,
and
Great.
you can help me out with that. We can have a piano player play it.
great.
That'd be great.
Well, seeing as we're right at 8, are there any final questions, final suggestions?
I have a question that
Sure.
comes to mind when we look at these songs. A lot of them seem to be tied to rebuilding the temple and Jerusalem and all that stuff. I was just, and is that basically because Passover was so miraculous and the Messianic age or the rebuilding of the temple will also be similarly miraculous? Is that how the two are kind of connected?
Yeah, I think that's a great connection. Yeah, I mean, it's opening up a much larger conversation. I don't have time to fill in quite here, but it is part, and it is part of actually most traditional Jewish prayer. Daily prayer on Shabbat is praying for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, and sort of the restoration of more broadly God's domain on earth, however you want to think about it. But especially, I think on Passover, the idea of B'chol dor v'dor, Chayav. Sorry, I'm messing up my Hebrew. Chayav Adam lirot et atzmo kilu yatsa mitzrayim, which means every generation's people need to think of themselves as if they were the ones who came out of slavery in Egypt. And I think the idea is that after the temple was destroyed, everyone was dispersed, everyone was scattered to the four corners of the world. And so just as the Israelites were brought into the land, you pray that we are brought back into the land. Of course, in modern times, and especially, in the tradition of Reform Judaism, we have a different perspective in the sense of we pray for the Messianic age, not necessarily the rebuilding of the temple. But that's a much larger conversation that, of course, I'm always happy to have, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So,
of course.
Thank you so much, everyone who joined us, for singing along, for playing along. If you have any questions, I'll go ahead and type my email address here. Feel free to reach out to me. I will do my best, and I'm going to work on the second dipping. That's going to bother me.
Second dip?
The second dip. It's going to bother me for the rest of the evening. So stay tuned, and thank you all so much. Hope you have a lovely evening and a happy Passover.
Thank you all.
Whenever you want to rise.
Thank you, Pearl.
Good night, everybody.